This is the difference. The budget is the tool. Mm-hmm. The hammer is the tool. The objective is the garden shed. Spendfulness to me was the equivalent of the garden shed. It's the word we've always been missing.
Yes.
It's about putting the same effort into making a plan for all of it as you do to put the effort in to earn all of it.
How you make it, how you wanna make it, how you make it, how you wanna.
Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Ernie.
And I'm Dave.
And this is Budget Nerds.
You are not alone.
No, you are not. Friends, we had the absolute best episode going. About 10 minutes in, though, we realized we weren't recording.
Whoopsies.
So, this is a week later, and take number 2. We have YNAB Dave on the show. Dave is an educator here at YNAB. I'm sure you all know of him in some sort of capacity, but we wanted to bring him on and talk more spendfulness, talk more 5 questions. So before we get into that, Dave, how about you introduce yourself to the folks that don't know, and then we'll get to hear a little bit of your YNAB story.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ernie. Cheers, Ben. Delighted to be here with Bert and Ernie, as I know I'm going to call them at some point during this session. But yeah, hi everybody, I'm Dave, and it's very difficult not to go into the next line that I do every time I teach, which is, hi, I'm Dave, welcome, and I'm hosting from Northeastern Ontario in Canada. Welcome to Get Started with YNAB. Yeah. So yeah, that gives you a clue. Yeah, teaching is a lot of what started me off here at YNAB all those years ago.
You've been doing it a long time. When did you start at YNAB? As an employee, I guess.
Good question. Trying to think of the last
anniversary.
Yeah, I'm trying to surreptitiously glance at the coins on my shelf, the YNAB employee coins. Yeah, somewhere around about 11 or 12, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably 11 or 12 years, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been teaching workshops all the time, but you're doing a lot of coaching stuff now too, right?
Yeah, that's been a part of the role now for about 3 years, I think, Ben? Something like that.
Yeah.
I think you were instrumental in setting that coaching program up. Yeah, if you don't know, we're talking about the YNAB Certified Coaches program, where we bring in aspiring want-to-be YNAB coaches and make sure they're up to the name.
There you go.
For them to go on to help people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've also been doing some work on the product side of things as well, right?
That's been the last couple of years now, but I'm still finding my feet in that work, Ernie. It's fascinating work working with the people who are doing a lot of thinking. I always thought, design and development, it's about cold pizza and a light bulb and hacking out lines of code. But there is so much goes into it that is nothing like that. The amount of thinking or generally maybe thoughtfulness, I will say, that goes into design as to what YNAB's going to be like going forward is tremendous. It's been a real privilege to get to work with that side of YNAB. Just trying to get more education in there is what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to make sure that there is you don't need to come to a workshop to find out how to use the app on day one, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And I feel like your 2 biggest claims to fame. I mean, there's so many little phrases that we say that came from your brain, Dave, but I think the 2 biggest ones are probably the wish farm. You wrote that first blog about the wish farm, right?
Yeah, that was your 2016,
idea.
Yeah.
And you actually have a farm, so I guess that's like where the idea came from, right?
That's it. The metaphors have all got. I'm a one-trick pony with this, right? The metaphors are nearly always, as I say. What about aging your money? No. What about aging your compost? You'd never use new compost, right? What about aging your money? No, not bubblegum machines. No, grain silos.
Dave is an analogy machine. That's the way I think of you, Dave. Is you're always thinking of a new way to teach something. Your other claim to fame is find the money first. I think that's my favorite by far. I think is the idea of checking your plan before you spend, and instead of covering over spending after the fact, actually check it before and move the money ahead of time. That way you don't eat a motorcycle like you wrote in your blog, right?
Yeah, it forces the trade-off before the event. Mm-hmm. Is the way I've always, because I went my first year of YNAB. I've been a customer for more like 16 years. But my first year of YNAB, I did what a lot of people do, which is passively track.
Right.
I was reacting after the fact, albeit with better information. I was still reacting after the fact and thinking, so this is great. It's easy. I've got it now. But not much is changing yet.
Right.
And then suddenly there was this light bulb moment where I realized if I made the trade-off before I did the spend, if I didn't have the money where I wanted it, I could move it. That was classic rules free. But I also found it made the moment of then spending the money far more enjoyable.
Right.
Whether it was the takeout food tastes better because you're not worried that you're spending money that I might consider to be more important on the takeout. The not knowing and the uncertainty and the second guessing is what it suddenly clicked on for me. Yeah. And that's what turned into the how to avoid eating a motorbike.
Because you went out to dinner and you spent money and you overspent, and then you're like,
yeah, the vintage bike category. Yeah.
Did you ever get the bike? I never don't think I've ever asked you. You got the bike?
Yeah.
But you ate a little bit of it that day.
Yeah, and it's no problem doing that as long as I knew I was doing it. That was the light bulb for me, because it's then behavioral change. It's not just I learned another feature in the app. It was that was the missing for me anyway. And there are many points where people experience their own version of our magic sauce. That was what it was for me. For my persona, that's what I needed to change. Not cut, as I always used to think. I've just got to cut spending and I'll be fine. Live under a stone and then that debt will be gone. Suddenly I realized it was just really about changing the way I spent my money. Yeah.
I see it in the community all the time. People are like, I've been using YNAB, but I feel like I'm just kind of spending how I always was spending, and then I fix it later, and I'm like, it's so nice to have an answer. Like this is the solution right here is find the money first.
Well, that's it, because I always look to see whether. It always amazes me when somebody says, do you know how long that wish farm has been one of our most, and I forget the word for it, something articles viewed, clicked, maybe more than retweeted, maybe retweeted, reaxed, whatever.
something.
But yeah, when something takes off in our community as well, amongst our fans and our customers, when something takes off there and you see those words reflected to somebody else, helping another dozen people, there's something really magical, and you go, you know what? That's a keeper. That's a phrase we can keep. It's universal and it's stuck in everybody's head. So
yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how you can know Dave is I think those two things, but so many other things too. I mean, so much. But that's what.
And we'll get into a lot of that other stuff. But I want to go a little bit back in time. I want to hear about your YNAB story.
Yeah.
Because you were a customer before you were ever an employee here. So what did life look like pre-YNAB? What brought you to YNAB? And kind of what life started to look like after you were using YNAB?
Debt is the 4-letter word that brought me here. Often preceded with other variations of other 4-letter words. But certainly, yeah, it was having never used to really ever worry about money from previous employment I had, and lifestyle I had. I never optimized it though. So if I'd found YNAB 5 years before I did, I would have been somebody who was looking really to take control and spend better, spend in a way that's more aligned. So much more I could have done if I'd had YNAB back then. Jesse happened to not have been born, by the way, when I first started earning money. So, but it's one of those things you look back and you say, if only. But no, the real thing that brought me was not only did I not really have a handle on spending, really I was a classic candidate then for when you get thrown, as we now call the curveball. Now I'm on this side of the Atlantic, I know what that means. Yeah, if you're on the other side of the Atlantic, by the way, and you're more into cricket, we're talking like a googly. Okay? Except it's a curveball over here. Yeah.
I like that word better.
Yeah. You guys have good words over there. You do.
Well, that's it. People think that baseball's a bit long, right? And you have to have new rules to speed a game up. Just in case you don't know, cricket can last 5 days. And still end in a tie.
Yeah, baseball's already the fast version of cricket. So what's the fast version of baseball?
That's it, yeah. But no, eventually what caught me up, what stopped me just managing to scrape through, so in a way I'm kind of really grateful for it, was a massive curveball / googly in terms of dropping me into a bunch of debt that I'd never really had to manage before. And that was primarily due to my planning to emigrate from the UK to Canada. And one of the assumptions I'd made is that selling my property over there would set me up over here. Then, of course, we went through a 35% market downturn in the UK. And I was left with two choices. Number one, do I jump anyway? And the other one, of course, do I wait for the market to recover? Problem is, moving to Canada also then involved having met the love of my life, who is now my wife, and the
Love
idea of
doesn't wait,
spending
right?
and the idea of spending an unknown amount of time waiting for a market to recover didn't appeal. Then, of course, there's a lot of expenses associated with that. I took a massive hit when I finally sold it. Come to Canada, it takes a long time to be able to apply and work legally, no means to bring money in, borrow some more. I'll just consolidate onto a consolidated loan and use my cards use the cards again. So I went through all of that, never having had experience of debt, to being incredibly poor at then managing the onset of it. And that's when I went looking for something to help.
Nice.
It was my way of contributing in a way when I couldn't contribute any other way. You go out to work, love, and I'll feel bad. But what I'm going to do in the meantime is I will do the cooking, I will do the cleaning, I'll look after the kid, I'll go to the mailroom, I'll deal with the bills, I'll find something to run our finances, I'll start to grow some food. That's kind of where I found YNAB, yeah.
And that's how you started the is that when you started doing the farm and everything like that too?
It was very much smaller scale then.
Right.
It was more something. It hadn't bitten me in the way it did, not having been much of a son of the earth back in my previous career. Suddenly it was, I'll do it because I can and I want to contribute. And then it kind of bit me because I love to cook.
Right.
And suddenly the idea of cooking with your own stuff got me to do it more and more year after year. Even then when I was working, it grew and it grew and it grew until eventually it became the whole thing. Let's get the chickens, let's get the turkeys, let's sell seedlings, let's do this. So yeah, that's how it kind of snowballed, as well as the debt snowball working at that point as well. You know?
Right.
Well, and did YNAB click instantly with you? Did you see that instant success, or did it take a little bit?
It clicked as a methodology. I loved the certainty of, I still remember to this day, the first time I gave all my dollars a job. And I wanted to just sit and look at the budget. I was actively waiting for something to happen in our financial life so I could prod it a bit more.
Right.
I
Yeah.
loved the certainty. And even if it was a bill, I'm not talking about can't wait till payday. I was happy. I was familiar with that feeling. But saying I can't wait till we pay that internet bill in a day because I'm going to get to type it into YNAB because, of course, no bank linking back then. And just seeing it change and seeing the perfection of it, that appealed. But it didn't really change the behavior, as I say, until I realized passive tracking and started with find the money first. That's when it supercharged. That was the turbo kicks in at the right revs, right? So
Got it.
Yeah. So you fell in love with just the organization of it all, and then the behavior change came with find the money first.
Especially because my background from budgeting was very much sort of large corporate style. Running projects, managing outflows, looking at him. It was never dealt in reality. It was, right, the finance director has decided that everybody needs 12% less, go find 12%. But that might still mean you need to spend more, but you can't change your mind along the way. If there was a finality that you set it in stone, then you stick to it, and you're measured at the end of the year by adherence to your best guess 12 months earlier.
Right.
So suddenly meeting YNAB.
We're like, do whatever you want.
Different.
Well, that's it. I mean, how many times, I don't know whether it's ever come up with both of your many meetings with people, but I feel in a way there's almost I I want to now run a company this way just to see the difference. I now want my local council to use YNAB. I now want my local state/province to use YNAB. Why are they still doing it?
How far can we take this?
Yeah, exactly. There was just this feeling that everybody could benefit from this no matter what. I didn't see it as the best debt reduction tool. It was a money management tool that fitted with the mindset, with a method and education to back it up. That was the winning formula for my conversion.
And all the debt, how long did that take you to clear up? So that was quite
eight to 9 years for the basic. Well, so let's say 6 to get me out of the hole I dug myself.
Right.
Then a little bit longer because we realized as we started to model certainly the non-monthly, the larger and the less frequent expenses. Once it dawned on me that what we used to call true expenses were really actually about future debt prevention.
Yeah, that's another big line from you, Dave, I think.
Yeah, it was you need to stop the water coming in the boat before you start bailing out the boat. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. So suddenly there was this, you know what, this debt actually, now we've modeled it all. The only problem is cash flow wise, we're doomed. We're on a slippery slope unless something big changes. So it took one more consolidation of debts. However, that decision was made in full control of the facts as to how much cash flow it would generate.
Right.
Yes, it would cost a bit more, but then the peace of mind that what helped us sleep at best at night then was, but I'm still putting money away for car repairs. So the next time I have one, it's not 2 steps back after 3 steps forward.
Right.
Progress became visible. Visible progress becomes motivation for the long term. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was sustainable. Like you said, it's not 3 forward, 2 back.
That's it. I mean, it's a tough one to swallow when you first start because you're thinking, I could be sending this money to my first credit card debt.
Well, and that's what we're told oftentimes. That's the narrative we hear is get as aggressive as you possibly can. Get rid of that debt. Get it out of your life. But easy to burn out that way as well.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with having a short sprint with a bit of reduction in spending to get you maybe, say you've got first target debt, doing snowball, and you're only maybe 3-4 months out when you sit down and model it and go, I can kill this in 4 months if. There's the trade-off the other way, right? If I do this, I can achieve that. So yeah, we did cut back on spending to change it into debt repayment money for the first of our debts. Massive motivation milestone. We've killed the debt and we've still got the money to put the winter tires on next October.
Because man, it really is cold in Ontario for a long time.
So yeah, then we settled into a far more regular pace. I mean, back then about the idea of getting a month ahead started to make more sense even though we've got debt, just like true expense funding made more sense even though we've got debt. Do we want to spend the next 8 years living paycheck to paycheck, or do we want to spend maybe some money getting ahead, give ourselves some peace of mind, some resilience kind of thing, and then focus on debt afterwards? So it all made sense when the pieces clicked. Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, we brought you here specifically because we have a new word and we have a new way of teaching our method. And so we wanted to talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about spendfulness a little bit. What do you think it means? What do you think about that?
It was the word that any time somebody wants to differentiate between YNAB and other budgeting, for those other budgets that are still around, that is, there was for me, it was an instant like.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'll cut to the chase. There was an instant like because immediately it was, this is the difference.
Yeah.
This is, it's not the budget is the tool. The budget, the hammer is the tool. The objective is the garden shed. Spendfulness to me was the equivalent of the garden shed. It's the word we've always been missing.
Yes.
That takes into account that it's not about how much you have. It's not even about how much you bring in.
Right.
It's about putting the same effort into making a plan for all of it as you do to put the effort in to earn all of it. You earn $1 once, you spend $1 once. Let's optimize the bit in the middle. And of course, that is so uniquely human to each of us, what we consider to be high versus low priority. Spendfulness to me just became that. That's the word.
Yeah. Yeah, it just makes
That's
sense.
what we're missing.
Well, I
the
love that.
harmony, the connection between yourself and what you have in terms of resources available to fill that self.
Yeah. And the connection to spending specifically instead of earning or even saving, you know, it's more in line with what money is for. It's meant to be spent. Right. And so
Correct.
I think so often we talk about, oh, I make it a goal. I want to save more or even like want to pay off debt. But really, in order to achieve all those things, you need to pay attention to your spending. And everything else comes together, right? And I feel like
I mean, why do you want to save? Why do you want to save? Well, I want to save. Saving is seen as the virtuous thing.
Right.
But really, it's why am I saving? It's to spend later.
Yeah.
But it's to spend later on something that's maybe a bit larger. And it's to spend on something that I prioritize. That's why we save.
Yeah, and if you're saving just to save, it's just kind of miserable. It's just I mean, because you have to make a sacrifice for no reason. You know what I mean? If I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to cut spending here because it's good to save money, I guess, you know, it's just kind of a bummer. But if you say, oh, I'm going to cut spending here because I want to go on vacation or even I just want to have more security in my life. I want to be able to not be afraid of losing my job, things like that, you know.
Yep. Or I want to make sure an annual bill, I want the money waiting for the bill to arrive.
Yeah.
I don't want it the other way around anymore.
Yeah. Or like I value what that bill represents, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I like that approach. So you said it was an instant, like, what was it like when you first heard the word? Because I think it was like April or so when we started talking about it internally and kind of poking around with it.
Yeah. First thing I went off to do was actually go and search for it.
Oh yeah, I knew this because you were the one that came up and you're like, well, in 1322, it showed up in a logbook. Or what was that, Dave?
Yeah, it was a reference back in a very archaic search. I mean, it was a reference back to something I'll think about 1580s, 1590s AD.
Somebody was being judgy, right?
Well, that's why I think it still fits beautifully. Yes, it was a comment about lads on sailing galleons coming back into port for the first time in 4 months, and how this observer said, you know, I've never seen such spendfulness, and it was clearly meant as a dig. It was clearly meant as a look at these coming back, drinking the flagons of ale, and you know all the rest of it, and spending money like a three-armed sailor, and it was kind of like. That's what I would do if I came back at the end.
I know,
of
right?
That.
You've been out at sea for so long. Imagine how boring it would be to be on a ship for months. You know, if like nothing interesting to eat.
Living on lemons, limes, and pork butts.
Hopefully,
and
lemons
like
and limes.
Yeah,
Some people might not even have that, and they get scurvy. And they
that's it. But the interesting thing for me, it was from the view of a third party. It was a perspective judgment from a third party. Somebody sat in the upper floor of their harbourside apartment, you know, maybe a rich cotton trader back then, or a wheat grain trader, and it was casting doubt upon the logic of what they were seeing in front of them as being worthy activity.
Right.
And it's something made me realize it's all in the eye of the beholder. So really, it's the individual person's view of what is aligning with their priorities right now. So yeah, I went and Googled it and searched for it and found that.
I love that. Yeah, you're like, has anybody used this? And I think that's one of the first things I did too, and it wasn't really out there. But except for somebody, I think we're good. Are we good on the trademark if somebody in 1580 wrote about it in some book?
Yeah, I know, it's strange. I mean, we think of fullnesses as suffixes to words as being a very last 5 to 10 year thing, don't we? We think of mindfulness and purposefulness and thoughtfulness, and maybe thoughtfulness a bit further back. But yeah, and yet there it was. Somebody had taken the word spending and
Yeah.
spendfulness just it.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, I know it's weird. We made up a word, but that's what humans do. That's what we do. We make up words because that's what we do. That's what our brains do,
Well, yeah,
So,
and we did make it up. We independently invented it because at the point the word came out, nobody else had spotted the 15th century connection. So
Right.
we did come up with it independently and say, it just lands. Whenever we read or hear reviews of YNAB, whether it's syndicated radio, whether it's a major app review, we're always up against what's left of the usual suspects that we go into the same space with, but we've never been able to get across and never seen reflected back the difference. Why are we different to any other budget or a spreadsheet? And we can say it's the app and it's beautiful and it's available and it's got... But the key behind it is that it's not there to sort of tell you what to do. It's there for you to make the decision and to be flexible along the way. So, it fitted like a glove.
Yeah.
So
I remember
lacquer.
when I discovered YNAB, there was just instantly something different about it. It was really tough to put my finger on it.
Right.
Why would I stare at this app for 10 minutes just looking at my available balances in those categories? I would never do that with my spreadsheet. I would never do that with any other financial software that I had tried in the past. But with YNAB, I did that all the time.
Yeah.
So it is that missing piece that we finally discovered to say, like, that's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, like, and the whole point is that you can control how you spend your money, and you can spend your money in a way that lines up with who you are. And so in like very inherently, judgment needs to go out of it. Like me judging how Ernie spends his money, it can't happen because it's the whole point of it is that Ernie's in control, and Ernie's intention is in every bit of his spending, right? And so for me to go and be like, oh, tut, he's spending his money in a way that I wouldn't, like that's not spendfulness, what those sailors were doing with spendfulness. They were expressing themselves in the world in the way they want. I mean, there are certainly wrong things you can do with money, right? But barring those things where it's just like, okay, like you're hurting somebody, right? There's nothing there is nothing you can do with money that's right or wrong. It's just up to you, and I think that's a big part of spendfulness too.
Yeah, and without turning it into a sort of like a 15th century sailing ship session, which I'll be delighted to come and talk about with you gentlemen at some point if you wanted to. But the other thing is, I often think, what was even more spendful, probably, about what that tut observer was observing, I bet you they'd made a plan for every one of those pound, shilling, and pence that they were just given when they got to the port side. I bet you for the last 3 months they've been sitting amongst themselves going, when I get
How are we gonna
back
spend
to
this money?
Plymouth, this is where I'm going to go. I'm going to spend this much on this and this much on that. And you know what? That was a darn sight more thinking in going into where they were going to spend their money than anything I was doing before I'd found YNAB. That was a spendful thing as well. It was forethought, priorities, and action.
Yeah.
There you go. Spendfulness. Yeah.
I love it. But yeah, let's talk about the 5 questions too, because we're releasing a lot of things. So we have this new word, spendfulness, which describes who we are and why we're different. But we also have a new way of teaching the method. And you were really involved with this, Dave. I feel like you were. I feel like you and Aaron and Todd and a few other people were like cloistered away for a little while, and we were, you come out every once in a while and be like, "Hey, I have a thought about this," right? But there needed to be like just a few people working on it for a little while. Otherwise, there's just too many voices. So I want to hear more about, what that was like. What kind of all of those meetings,
Words are hard, is what I learned from those meetings.
Words are hard. Yeah, you think your mind just turns to mush thinking about the wording of every comma, I mean, you're still thinking about it, Ernie or Dave. You posted about it on Slack today about maybe tweaking this and that, right? So it never really ends.
It's evolution through learning, but as we go forward with it, but also what led to them. I mean, the starting point was, what do we need to do with the rules?
Yeah,
that's where it started. We need something to remove, another North American phrase, the inside of baseball terminology.
Yeah, that was where it really started.
And it was, well, classic example was say, embrace your true expenses. So it started out as a, what do we do with the rules? How do we tweak the rules to better reflect what we are? And I forget where it came from. It was either one of my brilliant colleagues, you mentioned Erin, everybody knows Jesse. It could equally have been Dan on the team, who is a genius with words, who can take a tiny idea and turn it into a paragraph, or you can give him a paragraph and he'll turn it into a word. You know, he's just the best at it.
And he's the first one that said the word spendfulness too. So
he is the word spendfulness. And so I think it started out that way, and it started to become this thing where we said, well, let's just get rid of words like true expenses. Well, let's broaden what roll with the punches mean, because then we've got boxing as well, and we've got, and there was also a real feeling, and this goes back to decades of the rules are really all rule one. Rule one was always at a different level to rules 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
Rule 1, give every dollar a job. Rule 2, some of those jobs will be for later. Rule 3, you can change your mind about the jobs. Rule 4, you can get ahead on some jobs.
Right. Yeah.
It's all rule 1. So there was a level, like a graphic equalizer, with one side, the bass was turned up too far and the treble were too flat. We needed to rebalance. And then somewhere along that line, I forget when it happened or who did it, it stopped being just about simplifying the terms. And we kept thinking, well, what do we always say when we get the inevitable question? What do true expenses mean? What does embrace them mean? Oh, what it means is think about preparing for the larger or the less frequent expenses in your life. Okay, I get that. Thanks, Dave. And then we suddenly thought,
Why don't we just say that?
why don't we say it? And why don't we phrase it in the form of a question?
Okay.
And suddenly this light bulb of inverting from rules to questions. We stopped having to look for words that were statements, like rules need to be, and flicked into, well, what other kind of questions do we have to explain things as being about?
Right.
So yeah, that inversion to questions from rules was the real pivot point in the journey.
That's really interesting. I can see, like, linguistically how asking questions lets you speak in more plain language than these large statements that come down from on high, kind of a vibe, you know. It's easier to be more conversational, maybe something like that.
I think that's very true. But it also raises a far more, to me anyway, from the education perspective, it raises another interesting point as well, which is we've never had the answers.
Right. Yeah.
The people who've had the answers are all of us three when we were customers, all of the other people we've dealt with who are customers who have used YNAB and benefit, they are the ones who have always had answers. What helped them, what helped us, are the questions that YNAB made us ask ourselves, even when they were expressed as rules that required 2 levels of interpreters to get the English out the other end,
Right.
as to to make it actionable.
Yeah.
So I think there's a softer edge to questions, just as you mentioned, more conversational, Ben. But I think it's also more realistic that our guidance doesn't come from answering questions for you. It comes from getting you to ask questions that we know from all our 20 years are useful questions to ask.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that was the big one. Yeah.
But we still have the, like, authoritative, like, statement of give every dollar a job, and that's elevated. That's the whole shebang now, right? So it's kind of a trade-off. I think we have this, like, strong statement still, but we also have these questions that are more like, what do you want to do? You know,
That's it. It elevates. It solves the graphic equalizer leveling problem of rule 1 being everything, because now it is. It is everything. The method is, at least for now, give every dollar a job.
right. Right.
Oh, and by the way, that's not in itself going to really help anybody who doesn't know how to YNAB already.
Right.
So here are the questions you can ask that you and only you can answer to enable you to effectively give every dollar a job your way.
Yeah.
Your way, not ours.
And if anybody comes around and says, tut, 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 then you can say, listen, I thought about this. This isn't just random. I don't need to take your judgment because I know why I made these decisions. Right.
Yes. Yeah. I remember the very first large goal purchase that we made consciously and had put money aside to spend on while we were still getting out of debt. There was this sudden, and it was a really good grill.
Oh, nice.
A really good grill. First time when we actually moved to where we are now, the larger place, we have a covered deck. So the idea of buying a cheap kind of grill and it rusting out in a couple of years and it doesn't matter because no matter how much you promise yourself, you never put that cover back on, do you? Because it takes so long to cool down that you never put the cover on it and then it gets rained on and then it gets... So we saved up because we had a covered deck finally for a decent grill. And we enjoyed every moment of picking it, every moment of having it wait to be delivered, putting it together, cooking on it. And it was all achieved while we were still planning to get out of our debt. Now, did it slow down our journey? Yes. Did it make us more likely to finish our journey? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
perfect example.
Love every dollar you spend.
All right, Dave. Well, here's a question for you. So you're the find the money first guy. You loved that rule 3, roll with the punches. We got away with it. So what's your favorite question now, and where does that flexibility fit in? I mean, I know we have a question directly related to that, but what's your take there?
It's actually tougher than I might think to answer it because my natural gut feeling, and maybe that's where you were leading me, was surely it must be flexibility because that's the equivalent of, say, your favorite rule 3. But I also think we've done, as well as simplifying the language, as well as turning them into questions, I think this pass at the method has also generated a lot more usefulness in all the questions, I would say. I mean, what does the money need to do before I'm paid again has always been a staple.
Yep.
Yeah, the fact we now call it the reality question now is so much easily tied into what we've always taught and done as method for those people who we happen to get in front of us.
Right.
For other people, that was never called out before. It was give every dollar a job. It was rule 2, rule 3, rule 4. So I love the fact that we are now calling it out as the reality question, and the way that currently in January, and I know Ernie's been playing around with this as well, is this concept of, well, yeah, because until I've assigned my money as far as my next income, I don't really know what money's left to make any decisions with.
Right. It's kind of a mandatory thing you have to do. Not necessarily because it's the most important, but because it's the most urgent, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I was to make a list of things I'm going to do tomorrow, would I start by writing on the list, wake up, brush teeth? No, I wouldn't. It's a taken for granted. It's not going to be on my list of things to it's not going to be a unique thing to do. So yeah, I like reality because it's calling it out is the importance. Because giving people that first contact with the method, which is unequivocal, they have the answer to that question. But when they're there, decision money is what's left.
Right.
So the reality question I'm really pleased about. Then when we get into stability and resilience and creation, when we get into longer term, larger bills, when we get into getting a month ahead, being fully funded on the first, right? Waking up, fully funded on the first, creation. Those 3 to me are all then options for the money that you now have the ability to make decisions with because you've obtained a real number from the first question. But the other thing I really like about stability versus creation is it finally separates true expenses into what they have always been. 2 different things. Annual insurance on the vehicle, vet bills, car repairs, trip to Hawaii. One of these things is not like the other three.
Right.
Yeah. So I love finally this separation between larger expenses coming up and you expressing yourself in how you want to spend that money that makes the life that we want to have, that we want to achieve. So again, it's really difficult because I love that separation between them. So I can kind of go and go, well, what about resilience? You haven't mentioned that much. Maybe it's one of the other ones. Can't be this one. Well, you know what? I love this one as well because we haven't called out the idea of being fully funded on the first. We haven't called that out since, 2016 when we changed to age of money, to age your money.
Yeah. At least not on the top line as this is what we're doing.
Not on the top line.
Yeah.
It's been in material, it's been in workshops, but actually promoting that one back to that balancing the graphic equalizer levels, it's that one being called out now for everybody to be aware of, even if they have to ask a question about it, they're asking the question. And we got a good answer to go with it. So yeah, it's a lot tougher than I thought to pick one. But I'm gonna say it's flexibility just because all of the other stuff is a guess, right? I've always described payday as being, when you look at your budget on payday, it's your payday guess. It is a statement of your best guess today. The fact that you can't predict the future, the fact that you can't predict how you're going to change your priorities, it's why I always come back to flexibility, I think. But it's a lot tougher than it ever was when there were 4 rules. And I like that tension between the questions.
I feel like I'm pulling out too much insider stuff here, but I remember an iteration early on because you and Aaron and others would go and work on it and come out and talk to a few people and go back, And I remember an iteration where of the 5 questions where there were only 4 questions and flexibility wasn't one of them. And I was mad about that. I was like, you're not taking away my favorite rule. Because I'm also a Rule 3 guy, but and now a flexibility question guy, I guess you could say. But yeah, we brought it back in because I was a little worried, if we took it out. I think my impression was, we had 4 rules, we wanted 4 questions, right? And so, but we wanted to add the creation in there. So we're like, oh, what could be removed? Oh, the flexibility, maybe that's kind of a given. But I was worried like we did with 9 years ago or so with Rule 4 when we switched to age or money, and we kind of lost the emphasis. We didn't lose the principle of getting a month ahead of being fully funded on the first, but we lost the emphasis on it. I was a little worried if we took flexibility out, we would lose the emphasis on it. So I told Aaron, I was like, we got to get that back in there. So I was really pleased when y'all did go ahead and have 5 questions and bring that back, right?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, that was version 2461.2 beta.
Yeah, you were like, Ben, that was just a blip. Don't worry about it.
yeah, I remember that. That was Wednesday afternoon, the 15th of January. This won't be a surprise because this was very early days of questions. I was also at the time rather worried about the same thing, Ben.
Yeah. I was like, we can't lose that because I think it's it's a thing that makes us so different from other money management methods where it's no, you don't have to just go with your best guess 3 weeks ago. You can make a change anytime you want, so long as you're doing it with awareness, right?
Yeah, and I think you were right. There was an element of wanting to go from 4 rules to 4 questions.
Yeah.
I do think that was there.
Yeah.
But I also think it was wanting, again, to level the rules that were never level. There isn't... It's almost like saying, yeah, but flexibility runs through all of the others.
It is a little, yeah.
So maybe it's a core going through them all. Maybe it's not a question. And then I think we went to 6 questions.
Oh yeah,
and I can't remember what the 6th one was.
Oh man, you gotta look that up. And one of your Google Docs somewhere it's written down there. I don't think I ever heard 6 questions. That's fun.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what was broken out. I'm trying to think what it was. Maybe there was something about creation that collapsed into large or small. the sort of the wish farm question
Sure.
being built into the app. Maybe there was something there I would need to think on.
That's
Or
fun.
maybe I'm just completely wrong and I dreamt it one night because things were blurring between like
sure.
dreaming
I'm
of
sure
these
this
questions and living with them. You know,
made you delirious. I mean, like you said, you can only think about commas and specific words so much until you kind of go a little cuckoo, right?
yeah. And as we gradually broadened the net of people who we were seeking thoughts from, Erin came up with this wonderful line about the movie, The Sixth Sense.
I remember.
The I See Dead People. And she kind of said, that's the thing about this word. She said, I heard it sort of 2 weeks ago, and we've heard this from so many other people, and it didn't quite land. For me, it landed. Bang, it landed real quick.
Same.
But it was, you know what? Ever since I've heard this word, even though I'm still mulling over whether I like it or not, I've seen it everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I've read it everywhere. They're all missing the word, but they're all talking about that thing. And it was suddenly like the Sixth Sense, right? When you finally get the big reveal. And that's how Erin described it. And she's used it with so many people, people like big groups of our certified coaches who have come back in a couple of weeks and gone, it's growing on me because I'm seeing it everywhere. And that Sixth Sense example just kind of encapsulates it for me.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there is a vibe out there in the culture, the personal finance culture, but just the culture in general of like a little less judgment about spending, I think. I mean, it's still out there, but I think that we're moving more toward advice that's not so like one size fits all, more like less judgmental, you know what I mean? And I think, you know, are the changes we've made here, talking about spendfulness and also the way we frame the method is kind of in line with that greater cultural shift. And so when you see I See Dead People, I see it everywhere, right? I think it's because it's there's a vibe out there. It's happening, you know, we're a little less judgy, a little more accepting, and it's a good thing. It really is.
Sure. I mean, though, it is a spectrum, isn't it? I mean, at the other end of it, in another completely parallel universe that is nothing at all to do with the universe we are in at all in any shape or form, there will be somebody who shouts at people and does the opposite.
Right. Yeah. It's
That's
never,
the parallel
it'll always be
it
there.
doesn't
right?
exist in our universe. We know that, right? We're not picking on anybody. And for some people, maybe that's what they want to go for.
Yeah,
But,
sure.
but in our universe, it's kind of the opposite of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a good shift that's happening and going right along with it. And I think it's good because it's a good message in the world. So
I think, especially in January, what a great time to launch in January because everybody else is talking about cutting spending.
Mm-hmm.
They may have a different colored paintbrush to put a veneer on it and say, it's about cutting spending. Do you know what? That $5 coffee, you know, do you really need it? You could do this. It's about cutting,
Right.
cut. And it's not cut, it's change.
Change. Yeah.
Right? They missed the last piece. It's $5 coffee could save you this much. But
Right.
what's the other side of it? That $5 could be this.
Yeah.
Or it could be, no, the $5 coffee is what makes my mornings capable of me dealing with the mornings. It's what makes my mornings palatable
Yeah.
to me. It's my little bit of luxury in my life.
Yeah, it's not just saying like, oh, you could save $1 billion if you put this in the S&P. If you know, it's like, okay, nobody cares about a number of dollars they have in their account. They care about what can I get instead if I didn't spend the money on the coffee. What could I get
That's the
instead?
mindset.
And if what you could get instead is not worth it to you compared to the coffee, then you should go for the coffee, right? And so I think making it more concrete and saying, here's the actual trade-off instead of like, you could be a bajillionaire or whatever. Like, Okay, what do I do with that?
In that
you know?
example, buy the coffee or invest
I know, even
in
that.
stocks.
It's
Like no one does that. No one says no to Starbucks and then goes home and puts $5 in the S&P 500.
$5 in. Yeah, it's just Yeah, it's not. It's just silly. It just feels so silly to me. But like that's been the message of the personal finance world for so many years, and I feel like there's been a bit of a rebellion against that. And we think we felt it too. So. But like we've always had that message, like, but we didn't have a word for it. I don't think we've ever been like judgy about the way people spend money. We're always trying to make sure you have a framework for knowing how you want to spend your money, make sure your money goes that way. But we didn't have a word for it. Now we do. And I think it's just going to let us talk about it even more,
If it can raise the level of debate, whether it's between yourself and a partner, or even if it just raises the level of financial debate in your own mind, we're winning.
Yeah.
You are further ahead than you were the day before. You may not have set a target yet on a single category, but you are further ahead. You are starting to think about stuff that prior to questions felt a little bit prescriptive, and maybe that's not for me because my circumstances are unique. How can their rules apply to me? I mean, how many times have we've all taught live? How many times have we had the kind of, I don't think this will work well for me because insert individual personal financial circumstance. Mm-hmm. It could be because I've got $300,000 in the bank.
Right.
It could be because I've got $500 in the bank. It could be because I'm debt free and fully maxed out on my contributions, or it could be I'm drowning in debt. There is always it won't work for me. Nobody kind of knew which people it was designed to work for immediately, but everybody thought it wasn't designed to work for them.
That's true.
And maybe that's because we were trying to be prescriptive. We were trying to have authority, as you said earlier, Ben, where in reality, questions open up that dialogue, far more conversational, as you said at the time as well.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what difference it kind of makes with that framing.
All right, we're about almost 60 minutes in. Any final thoughts here, Dave, before we let you go?
Well, I do think in the last 10 days I've started to realize something that has cemented my confidence in the effectiveness of all this work we've been talking about. Given that we've sort of always been doing this anyway, it's not like we're suddenly saying, don't give every dollar a job.
Right.
Ignore those non-monthly bills. We're not doing that, but I find it interesting that there are so many phrases that smart people have come up with as a result of this work that we could have been using for 20 years.
Right.
But we never thought of them. Fully funded on the first has come up a couple of times. We could have been using that for 20 years. Things like make a plan for all of your money before you spend any of your money. That came out 3 months ago or so. But we could have been using it 20 years ago.
Right.
So I think it's very interesting. It's a real sense of strength for me in the team that's delivering this, that we have sort of gone, well, we can get better just because it's caused us to challenge our own assumptions. We raise the level of methodological debate by challenging it and questioning it and pulling it apart. But the fact we can come out with lines that suddenly you go, why wasn't I using that? Oh, I should have been. That would have been awesome. But yeah, I see that as a real kind of acid test that this is where we need to be. That it's the best work we've done methodologically, certainly since I've been with the company.
Wow, I love that. Nice.
Yeah, and that's exciting because we're going to be a year from now, 10 years from now.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there who need to hear this message. And I think it's going to reach a lot more people than ever before because of the changes we've made here. So it's exciting.
Well, both of you two gentlemen are significantly younger than me, so maybe you'll get to find out what it's like in 20 years' time. And if you do, in our next 20 years, make sure you send me an email. But yeah, where will it be in 20 years? I'll tell you where we'll be in 20 years. I know exactly where we'll be in 20 years from meeting all of you in April. Where we'll be in is very good hands. Oh. That's where we will be in 20 years.
Love it. Well, I think we could end it right there. I love that.
Perfect place.
Well, if you have a question for Dave or a comment, you can email budgetnerds@ynab.com. We'll be sure to pass it down on to him. Or if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about all these changes and the direction we're headed here. It's exciting.
All right, Dave, thanks so much. It was great having you on the show.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And friends, we'll see you in 2 more weeks.
All right. Happy wine having.